not to scare all of you, we will be recording this session if you didn't already hear that. We're hoping to post this later on for students that weren't able to make it. Like I just said, if you're just joining us, please feel free to let us know where you're logging in from in the chat. We'll be getting started shortly.
All right, folks, we're gonna go ahead and get started today. One, it's so great to see where folks are coming from. So happy to be with you this evening. Welcome to the HAAS Admissions During COVID-19 webinar. My name is Brianna Wright. I'm the program director and counselor with the Educational Opportunity Program, EOP. And it's just so nice to have you all join us today. And we have deep appreciation for our partners and family members and HAAS for coming and doing this webinar today. So thank you all so much. This really came to fruition from collaboration between HAAS and EOP and understanding the impact of the times that we're in now. And it's been a lot to navigate, a lot of change. And so this is your time to learn about the HAAS admissions, get your questions answered, and to have time with the folks that are here to support you in this process and really have all the information. Just a reminder, EOP, we're here for first generation students, low income students, and students that identify as historically underrepresented. Any one of those three identities, and you're a part of the EOP family. So you can connect with us, go on our website, and we're here for you. And so today, without further ado, really it's about you and your HAAS admissions. So I'm gonna pass it over to our family at HAAS, our colleagues that are here really to support you. So take your time in understanding this information and asking all of your questions. So I'll pass it over to Monique. And again, thank you all so much.
Thank you, Brianna, for that very warm welcome. We're really excited to be here. Thank you for making space for us and having us. And thank you to all the students online joining us. We know y'all have a lot, so we really appreciate your time. We're excited to be here to talk with you about the business major and the application process, especially within the context of the pandemic and everything that 2020 has brought. And if you haven't already, again, just if you feel comfortable, it's been cool to see where people are calling in from. So leave city. A lot of folks from Tracy, got a little community out there, and some folks from SoCal. So really cool to see. And then as you have questions, we're always here to answer them. Please use the Q&A function in Zoom to do that, and we'll try our best to address all of them. And someone from New Jersey, way far. Hold on. Oh, thank you. Before we dive into the presentation, we'd just like to take a minute to introduce ourselves. I'm Monique. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions, and I support on all admissions efforts for the undergraduate program. I'd like to invite my colleagues to introduce themselves and talk a bit about their roles within the undergraduate program.
I'm Sojourner Blair, Director of Admissions for the undergraduate program. I'm also a HAAS alum. I was an EOP student when I was at Berkeley, first generation college graduate, born and raised in the Bay Area. So it's great to be here. And I attended Summer Bridge as well. So I took advantage of a lot of opportunities when I was here at Berkeley. So welcome. I'm super excited that all of you are here. And I'm hopeful that we can answer all of your questions with respect to admissions and the pandemic and put all of your anxieties at ease tonight.
Hi, everybody. Super excited to be here as well. My name is Alessandra. I'm the Assistant Director of Admissions and Outreach. We are here really to provide support, to provide you with answers to your questions, as Brianna mentioned. We are super excited to have partnered with EOP. This idea really started with Brianna. So EOP, Brianna herself is incredible. So we really appreciate her presence and her ideas and willingness to collaborate.
All right, so thank you, Sojourner and Alessandra. We also want to stress that we hope that you don't feel overwhelmed by this information and don't feel like you have to memorize it or take lots of notes, since some of this information is available on our website. And like Alessandra said, since we're recording, we hope to share this with students. And also that we're here to help you. You can reach out to us via email at uginfo@haas.berkeley.edu, and we'll also put that in the chat. Or schedule a one-on-one advising appointment using the link on this slide, and I'll also put that in the chat so you have it for reference. Okay, so then we wanted to talk a little bit about our outreach program, RISE at Berkeley HAAS, just commonly known as RISE. Since you're considering the business major, we encourage you to join our RISE program. So RISE is an outreach program with the mission to increase the applicant pool of historically underrepresented students, specifically Black, Latinx, and Native American students pursuing the business major. RISE provides participants with academic services and advising and workshops and events about the application process to help you get to HAAS. If you're interested, please visit our website to learn more and see our events and complete the interest form so you can get on our mailing list about events. So I'll also put that in the chat so you have that if you'd like to join. RISE has a number of events happening throughout the end of the month and throughout November. With the application opening on November 2nd, these events really serve to help you prepare your application to HAAS. So the next one we have coming up is actually on Thursday that we're doing in collaboration with HUBA, is a current HAAS student panel, so you can hear about the student perspective. And then we have an essay and resume writing workshop, which we're partnering with our student government here, HBSA, to do. And then we'll have an application Q&A specific to RISE students with our RISE mentors. And then we'll have another resume and essay writing workshop with LBSA. And then we'll have another application Q&A on November 17th. And another essay and resume writing workshop with HUBA. Again, these are all listed on the RISE website, and also links to register are on the website. So this evening, we'll spend the rest of our time talking about the application, changes to the admission process this year, and answer common questions and any questions that you might have. So we'll start with talking a little bit about the application and the selection criteria. And before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about a really key piece of the HAAS culture, which are the Berkeley HAAS defining leadership principles. And as I mentioned, they're a really big piece of the HAAS culture and permeate every aspect of HAAS happenings, including curriculum, classes, and staff hiring. The defining leadership principles are question the status quo, confidence without attitude, students always, and beyond yourself. At HAAS, we're working to reshape how people do business, and these are principles we look for when admitting students, and we want to see how applicants embody these principles. Now I'll hand it off to Alessandra to talk a little bit about the selection criteria.
Thanks so much, Monique. So we're going to be going over some of the basics of the application before we dive into any changes and really addressing your questions and how this is going to look due to COVID-19. So I'm going to go over the application in these three parts briefly. As you can see here, we break down the way in which we evaluate applications into these three parts. You can see the largest part of this pie is the grades and coursework. That's 50% of our evaluation. We are evaluating mostly your performance in the HAAS prerequisite courses. So those prerequisites are the 2 semesters of calculus, the 2 semesters of English reading and composition, economics, principles of business, all those classes that you've seen probably on our website, on our self-reported academic record flyer. That's what we're looking at. We're also looking at your academic history since you've actually entered college to really see any trends or any patterns with your grades. But in terms of your performance, we're really looking at the prerequisites. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later in this presentation. You can see the other 50% of our selection criteria is broken up between the essays and the resume. So if you're really thinking about this big picture, we're looking at 50% grades and 50% everything other than grades. So you can definitely rest assured that if you've had some trouble, if your GPA isn't super high, maybe you had a couple of semesters that were rough, and also obviously in the last 2 semesters this spring, as well as this fall, we're going to be talking about how we're going to be looking at this past year as well. But you can also rest assured that we're going to be looking at your application holistically. We also are very interested in what you do outside the classroom and also who you are, how you tell your story, what you're really interested in, and what is your actual rationale for applying to HAAS. So when you're really thinking about the application, it's, I think, the easiest to think about it 50% grades and 50% non-academic. So breaking this down, like I mentioned, we're mostly looking at the prerequisites. You can see those prerequisites are listed on the left. What we're looking for generally is a letter grade in the prerequisites. The only exception to this is during spring 2020. We allowed all students, the UC Berkeley campus allowed all students to take classes pass, no pass. So if you took a prerequisite or more than one prerequisites during spring 2020, and you took it for pass, no pass, that's completely fine. But going forward, so this fall and forward, you need a letter grade. So like I said, we're looking at performance and prerequisites. We're also considering your course load. So we're taking into context really how many courses you were taking, whether you were taking a lot of difficult courses at the time. And then, like I mentioned, grade trends. So we are trying to establish your academic performance and also your consistency in academic performance. But it's important for you to remember that GPA isn't everything. GPA does not tell the entire story. So when we're looking at grade trends, when we're looking at your consistency, a lot of the time that doesn't come across with just your GPA. So like I said, maybe you had a rocky start and you've just slowly increased your academic performance. That's something that's really going to speak in terms of your application. So GPA, the lesson of this slide is GPA is not everything. All right, so talking a little bit about the essays, this is 35% of our evaluation. This is really the best way that we have of really getting to know you and really hearing your voice and kind of what's motivating you, what decisions you've made that have led you to applying to HAAS. This is also where you get to really dive deep and explain to us what it is you're interested in and what you're hoping to contribute to HAAS. So through the essays, we really learn the most about you. I mean, obviously your grades, your resume, it does tell us something, but this is where we really get to know you. So I would encourage you to dig deep, maybe, in preparation for the application being available, start journaling about some topics such as, why are you interested in business? What has led you to this? This is really where you're going to get to show us who you are. So I would encourage you, as I'm going to show you on this next slide, to really tell your story. Don't hold back and don't be deterred by what you hear from other people and what you think we're looking for. I think that's probably the biggest hang up for the applicants that we have is people are writing a story that's not theirs and saying things that they think we want to hear, when really what we want to hear is your story. We want to hear what you've gone through. We want to hear what has led you to applying to the business major and what's motivating you. Just a couple of quick reminders: do not use the essay section as an opportunity to list your achievements. That's what the resume is for. So the essay is really where you get to go a little bit deeper and tell us a little more about who you are. It's not the best place for you to kind of list, oh, when I was in ninth grade, I got this award, and then I did this. And you can definitely, incorporate that into your larger story, but this isn't really the place for a listing. Also, kind of the cardinal rules is to be mindful of the word limit and answer the prompt. So you want to make sure that whatever you're writing about, you're addressing the prompt. That's super important. All right, so our last section, this is 15% of our evaluation, is the resume. So you can see on the left a couple of different activities. These are just some ideas of things that are commonly students will put on their resume. One thing I really want to clear up right away is the resume section is not actually a physical resume like you would submit to an employer. So it's not like a PDF document where it has your name and a fancy font. This is actually just a template. Very similar to the resume section on the UC application. If you all remember when you applied to UC Berkeley, it was a template. So we're giving you space to fill in your activities and extracurriculars by category. So a couple of different activities, like I said on the left, you can see here the very first item on here, this is different than usual, is household responsibilities. And we're going to address this. Sojourner is going to go into this a lot more in depth. But one thing to consider is that on the resume this year, you can definitely include, and we encourage you to include, household responsibilities or any ways in which you've showed leadership in your own household, in your own family, and in your own community. I think that's going to be one of the biggest changes of this year's resume. But a couple of other things, obviously community service, work experience, and internships. We do not prioritize one type of activity over another. So I do get questions about, do I need an internship? Is HAAS really looking for students that have an internship? The answer is no. If you were able to get an internship and it was in the area you were interested in and it's helped you learn a lot more about what you want to pursue, that's great. Definitely include that. But we are not going to give you a fast pass into HAAS just for having an internship. It's definitely more than that. We encourage you to pursue activities that you're actually interested in. So what are we looking for within all of these activities? We're mainly looking at leadership potential, impact, and consistency. So those top 3 bullet points, and let me give you a little bit more detail on each one. Leadership potential, we're looking for the roles and responsibilities that you actually took on in whatever activity, whatever category, whether that's community service, whether that's in your own home, whether that's at a job. We're looking at what you actually did and how you made an impact in that organization, for example, or club, or in your own household. How did you make a positive contribution through the actual role and responsibility that you took on? We're also looking at time commitment and consistency. So we want to see that you've been involved in something for a long period of time. This is definitely going to change and be affected by COVID-19 because maybe you were in a campus club that then, that your involvement discontinued because campus was shut down. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. But in general, we're looking for students that have been involved in something for a period of time. It's not just like, oh, I did this for a week, or I did, a one-day beach cleanup and then never did it again. So we are looking for things where you have put the time in, and we feel that once you are able to put the time in, it's easier for you to actually show your leadership and make an impact. Those things don't happen usually with just a one-day, beach cleanup. Also, accomplishments and contributions, we definitely want you to put those down, and then levels of responsibility. So be really specific about what you actually did. Outside of a formal leadership title, that's not really what we're looking at. We're looking at what you actually did. So be really specific and write about what you actually took on, the roles and responsibilities. All right. So I am actually going to pass this back to Sojourner, who's going to dive into a lot about how each of these sections is going to change now due to COVID-19.
All right, thank you, Alessandra and Monique. What a wonderful overview of our process. And we understand that this year has been crazy. It's not just the pandemic, it's all the social unrest, it's the wildfires in California. So there's a lot that's been going on throughout the course of this year. And we know that students are having to bear the brunt of a lot of this. So what I thought would be good for us to do right now is just to go through each piece of the application that Alessandra has done such a great job of explaining, and then articulate sort of how we're going to view each of these areas within the context of all that's going on. So the grades and coursework piece we'll start with. That's the most important piece just in terms of the percentages. It's worth 50% of our evaluation. And there's always a lot of questions and anxiety around grades for students. So what I want to do first and foremost is just put students' mind at ease about the grade piece. Granted, it's important. I don't want to lessen the importance of it, but it's not the only thing that we look at. What we did this year as a result of the pandemic for spring 2020 is we allow students to take courses pass, no pass. And that's fine if students did take advantage of that. We hope that you did. You will not be penalized for doing that. For spring 2020, essentially what we're going to do is just look at your transcript. We're going to see that you completed the course with a pass or at least a C- or higher if for those that took it for a letter grade, and that's it. It's not really going to be given much more weight than that. Another issue that has come up with respect to grades is course load. There's a lot that students have to bear right now. There's a lot of additional family responsibilities. There's a lot of mental health issues that are going on with students as well. I mean, this is a lot to take on right now. So students have had to drop courses and maybe take a reduced course load as a result of it. And what I'm going to encourage students to do, and you're going to hear this throughout my part of the presentation, is utilize our optional essay. In the application, there's Essay D. And Essay D essentially will ask you to articulate to us any additional information you want the admission committee to be aware of that was not presented elsewhere in the application. So that's essentially where you're going to put everything that has affected you, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's the wildfires, whether it's all the social unrest that has happened as well. You just want to tell us, how things have changed for you, how it sort of affected your plans. Perhaps you had, an internship, or perhaps you had to drop a course, or you had, to take a course pass, no pass that you weren't anticipating. Those are the kinds of things that you will want to articulate in that essay so that it will provide some context to your situation. But I think Alessandra did a really good job of articulating how we're going to look at the grades and coursework section in general. Course load, we'll look at grade trend. Perhaps you didn't have a really good semester, but every semester after that you've done really well. We'll look at combination of courses that you've taken. So there's a lot that we're going to look at. So I don't want students to get so caught up just in one grade, get caught up in just one number. So we're going to take everything into account. And for us, a comprehensive review is something that we've always done. So although we are in the midst of a pandemic, it's not necessarily going to alter the way that we look comprehensively at an application. We always look at students within their own individual context, and that's really not going to change. So we can go, I think, into the essays next. So again, this is the optional essay that I just mentioned. This is really going to be the best opportunity for you to articulate how you've been impacted. And we've boosted the word count for the essay. This cycle is going to be 500 words. So it's going to be quite lengthy and should provide you enough space to really describe how you've been impacted by all of this. And everything that you provide in this optional essay will be considered by the admission committee. And again, it provides context. It's allowing you to tell your story so that we understand why things in other places in the application look as they do. Perhaps you weren't able to get engaged in activities. Perhaps, there was some issues with your grades. The optional essay will provide you with the space to articulate how you've been impacted. So definitely we're encouraging all applicants to take advantage of that essay. So the resume, in addition to the grade piece, I would say the resume is probably where we're getting a lot of questions, because we know pretty much things shut down in March. So students had planned internships for the summer. They had extracurricular activities that they were engaged in that they were not able to continue because of we're essentially in a shelter-in-place type situation. And we're aware of that, and it's impacted a lot of people. So how are we going to look at the resume in light of that? We're still going to look at the same things that we looked at before. So we're going to look at leadership potential. How have you impacted the organizations that you were a part of? Have your responsibilities changed? We understand that many people have taken on many more family responsibilities, whether you had to care for a loved one who was ill, or you had to care for, some siblings because your parents were out working. So all of those things will factor into our decision. So definitely make sure that we're aware of how your family situation has changed, how your responsibilities within that have changed as well. And if you had internships planned for the summer that were canceled because of the pandemic, you can definitely articulate that in the optional essay as well. It's not really a space in the resume to talk about things that were going to happen that did not. You can definitely put that in the optional essay to describe all of the things that you had to discontinue because of the pandemic. And of course, again, it provides context to your situation. And we look at all the applications individually. So we definitely want to ensure that students are giving us as much information as possible so that we can evaluate your application specifically within your own context. So that was pretty much just an overview of how we're going to look at the application. I mean, essentially, we're going to do our comprehensive review as we always do. We allowed students to take grades or courses, pass no pass, during spring 2020. We are beefing up the optional essay, which is going to be the best opportunity for students to provide context to their situation. We wanted to make sure that we left a lot of room for questions. So if you do have questions, please enter them into the Q&A feature, and we will go through as many as possible.
All right, so I'm just going to jump in to some of these questions in the Q&A. So let's see here. Will the admissions committee place more emphasis on grades/activities in pre-pandemic semesters?
That's a good question. I mean, we're going to look at students based on what it is they record in the application. And the pandemic has impacted students in a lot of different ways. For some of them, it was kind of a bit of an inconvenience, but they were still able to engage and participate in activities, even beyond March. And then there were others who were completely shut down. They had to move back home. There were a lot of situations that impacted their ability to engage. So again, we're going to look at each situation individually. So whatever your situation is, you want to make sure that you give us as much information as possible. And we're going to evaluate whatever is in your application. And we're going to take all of that information into account.
Great, thanks. How many essays besides the optional one are there?
There'll be 2 essays. So the first essay is mandatory, meaning that all of the students who apply to the program have to answer that question. And essentially that one will ask, why are you interested in applying to the business major, essentially. And then the other questions are, it's the topic B or C, and you can choose either one that you want to answer. And we don't have a preference for either one. And usually they are framed within the context of our defining leadership principles. And it allows us to really assess fit for our program and behaviors and characteristics that align with our defining leadership principles.
Great, all right. So how should we prepare for interviews this semester?
Just be yourself. The interview is a great opportunity for you to really speak to your rationale for applying to the program. It's an opportunity for you to make a case for admission. But we're not expecting for you to be anybody other than who you are. So just be yourself. Nothing really to prepare for. I would just say that you need to be ready to explain why you're applying to the program. Be prepared to talk about, leadership as well, because we're looking for students, who demonstrate leadership. And oftentimes, with respect to the pandemic, maybe in the resume piece, you weren't really able to speak to it because a lot of your activities were shut down. So if you're interviewed, that'll be an opportunity for you to speak to that in the interview, as well as the optional essay for those of you who are not picked for an interview.
And can you actually explain what the structure of the interview will be this year?
Mhm. Last year, we actually did a pilot of a video upload for the interview, and we're going to continue with that this year. So what's going to happen is you'll receive an email, probably sometime in January, and correct me if I'm wrong, Monique or Alessandra, you'll receive an email at some point in January asking you to upload a video. And there'll be instructions on what it is you need to do. And then when you log into our application portal, you'll see the questions that you have to answer. And then you'll get a one practice session. And then you just record. And it's probably going to be like 6 or 7 questions. You'll have about a minute per question. And then you upload the video, and it's pretty simple.
Great. Okay, so I'll ask the next 3 and then I'll hand it over to Monique. Are the 3 essay questions, I think you already addressed this, but just quickly, are the 3 essay questions going to be the same this year as they were in previous years?
No. The first question may be the same, but B and C will be different.
Cool. Okay, so when you say evaluate course load, does that mean you would evaluate a computer science pre-HAAS double major differently than you would a student who was only pre-HAAS? So I guess meaning a student that may have had more coursework or would have had like a lot more classes maybe.
Mm-hmm. With respect to the grades and coursework piece, primarily we focus on prerequisites for HAAS because those are the courses that are consistent across all of our applicants. So we're going to be looking specifically at those. And so course load can be viewed in a couple different ways. It can be viewed within the context of the prerequisites. So what combination of courses have students completed? How many prerequisites has a student completed in one semester? So that's one example of course load. But we do understand that some majors are really much more quantitative than others. They're engineering majors on campus, STEM majors, et cetera, where students have had to take, extremely difficult combinations of courses, and we're aware of that as well. So we will look at that too. But to be consistent across our pools, the prerequisites are really the main driver for us with respect to the grades and coursework piece.
Great. And then really quickly, this actually isn't in the Q&A, but it's a question that I've received a lot. So quick question about essays. Many students have asked, how should they structure their response to essay D? Should it be bullet points? Does it have to be like a story like the other essays? How would you suggest they structure it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, it can be whatever method is going to allow you to get the information across. As I mentioned before, we've raised the word count, so you'll have 500 words to really communicate to us. And if you want to use bullet points, that's perfectly fine. Same thing with the resume. I mean, we get questions about that too. You can use the resume, you can use bullets or paragraph format, whatever you want. But the optional essay, whatever method allows you to get your point across, that's how you should use it.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm gonna pass it off to Monique.
Thank you. So it sounds like we might have some first-year students or folks who are going to apply next year as juniors, perhaps. Will this process be the same for next year?
Possibly. I mean, it doesn't seem like we are going to be out of this pandemic anytime soon, at least through the spring semester. We know that courses will be virtual. So possibly, I mean, it's too far ahead for us to determine now, but definitely we'll keep the optional essay. It's always part of the application, but we don't know exactly to what impact or extent the changes will persist.
A quick question about interviews. Will everyone be interviewed this year?
No, we get like 700 or 800 applicants for our continuing Berkeley pool, so we wouldn't have the bandwidth to review all of the videos. But it would be nice if everybody had the opportunity to do so. When we're selecting students for interviews, we actually do it after the application has been evaluated. And for the most part, we'll invite students who are on the cusp of being admitted or denied. We'll also bring in students who may have been particularly strong in one area of the application and perhaps a little bit weaker in others. Those are really the 2 primary reasons for interview selection. And the interview is a great opportunity for students to really communicate and articulate directly to the admission committee, but we do make a lot of admission decisions without an interview.
Thank you. An interesting question here in the chat. If there's something that is uncomfortable to talk about or taboo that has greatly affected our coursework, is it still recommended that we bring it up, and how will it be accounted for in the application otherwise?
Yeah, and we We invite students to provide us with as much detail as they're comfortable with. And we understand that there are definitely some topics that students are not comfortable broaching in an application. So we pretty much leave it up to you to provide us as much or as little detail about your personal circumstances you're comfortable with. So yeah, I mean, and whatever you provide to us will be considered as part of our decision making.
Thank you. A quick question. What year do students typically apply?
Students typically apply to us during the fall term of their sophomore year. And then when you apply, you can have courses in progress during that fall term and plan for the following spring. All admission requirements have to be completed by the end of that spring term. We do not, however, restrict students to only applying as sophomores. Students can apply as juniors as well. Our advice to students who may perhaps want to wait to their third year is just to ensure that you have an alternate major pretty solidified. And when you apply as a junior, we'll still give you 2 full years to complete the business degree. So you will probably be at Berkeley for 4.5, 5 years, which means extra tuition considerations.
In terms of eligibility and completing the prerequisites for HAAS, when do we have until to complete those prerequisite courses?
So once you submit your application in the fall, it's usually available in the month of November, you have until the end of the following spring to complete everything. So for most applicants, that would be the end of the spring of your sophomore year.
Thank you. And then likewise, is there any negative impact for taking a prerequisite course that spring after you submit your application?
Yeah, for the most part, taking a course during the spring term doesn't impact the admission decision. However, there are circumstances where students have been inconsistent in their performance. So the first semester they did really well, second semester not so well, third semester, you know, they were kind of iffy as well, and then they have courses planned for spring. In that case, because your performance has been inconsistent, it's difficult for us to determine how well you're going to complete the courses. But for students that are consistent and they've done well in everything, and then you have a course planned for spring, not a big deal at all.
Thank you. And then how about for fall 2020 grades? How are those taken into account since we will apply before grades are finalized? And do you look at them when our applications are being reviewed?
Absolutely. So we'll look at all the grades through fall. And what's going to happen is when you submit the application in November, of course, the fall grades, as you mentioned, are not available. We will update your application in January when fall grades post to the transcript. And then our evaluators will review the fall grades as well.
So if we are part of DSP, will that be shown on our application, or would that be something we would add in our optional essay?
It will not automatically appear in the application. So if you want to disclose it to us, then you need to tell us, and you can utilize the optional essay for that.
All right. So, and then follow up on that question about optional essay. What we include in the optional essay, can it be used against us, or just wanting to clarify about confidentiality in that regards?
Oh, not at all. Definitely will not be held against you. And everything that you submit in your application is totally confidential. So you don't have to worry about that. But we're not in the business of penalizing students for being honest. So, you know, whatever you feel comfortable telling us, you're not going to be penalized for it. And this year, I mean, with the pandemic, we understand that there has been a lot of different circumstances that have impacted students, and it's not our goal to penalize students in any way. What we want to do is be as fair as we can with our process and evaluate each student within their individual context.
Thank you. Another question about the application. Is there a portion of the application where we would need to provide a work reference or letter of recommendation?
We don't actually review letters of recommendation, but we do have what we call a resume verification process. So we randomly select students to verify portions of their resume, and this will be included in the application, some instructions for that process. But essentially, after you submit your application, students will be randomly picked, and then you get an email saying, hey, you've been selected to verify portions of your resume. If you're selected to do that, then you would have to get, you know, like letters from employers, letters from faculty advisors who manage clubs, and that kind of thing. And then you would upload it and attach to your application so you can verify those entries. And we do that because we want to maintain the integrity of our process, just as we review transcripts To evaluate grades, we also want to review documentation to support resume entries.
Thank you. A brief question here. If you apply this year but aren't admitted, can you apply again next year?
Unfortunately not. I mean, we want Berkeley students to get on about the business of graduating from the university, so we only allow Berkeley students to apply once. So if you do apply in November and you decide that you don't want to go through with the process, you have until the end of January to withdraw your application. If you withdraw your application, then you can reapply. But if you do not withdraw, then that's your only time to apply to the program.
Thank you. A number of questions about grades, questions about what semester grades will be emphasized, or if we're looking at GPA more, and then also I wanted to hear more again about how you're looking at the courses taken in a semester.
Mm-hmm. So when we look at the grades and coursework piece, and I'll talk about it normally how we look at it and then the changes for this cycle. Usually when we look at the grades and coursework peak, we're focusing primarily on the prerequisites. How well are you performing in the courses that we require? So principles of business, calculus, econ, stat, English reading and composition, because we feel that those courses are going to really give us a very good indication of how you're going to perform in the business major. So those courses are heavily emphasized in our process. We don't, however, calculate a prerequisite GPA. We look at your overall GPA, because that again is going to show us how well overall you perform as a student at Berkeley. This year, of course, is going to be a little bit different because for spring, a lot of students took all of their courses pass, no pass, which is fine. I mean, we gave you the option to do that, and I'm happy that students took advantage of it. So we're definitely still going to focus on the prerequisites. We're going to see how well students performed in those, and we're going to continue with that. But if there's any information that you want to provide to us that impacted your performance, then of course we're going to take that into account and factor that into our admission decision.
Thank you. And then a follow-up to the grades. If you performed not as well as you would have liked before COVID, would you recommend that you use the optional essay to kind of explain that lower grade?
Absolutely. I mean, utilize that optional essay to explain to us anything that you want us to be aware of. I mean, you have one shot at applying a HAAS for the most part, and we want to make sure that you have the space to tell us whatever it is you want to tell us. So utilize the optional essay for anything that is not presented elsewhere in the application that would add value to the application or provide context to your situation.
Thank you. And then if you apply as a junior, does that hurt your likelihood of getting admitted to HAAS?
Not at all. We understand that students have a lot of reasons for why they want to wait to apply. Not everybody is super gung-ho HAAS when they enter Berkeley. Some students are wanting to do a simultaneous degree, and they're getting a lot of the lower division coursework prep out of the way during their first couple of years, and they're waiting to apply to HAAS. So absolutely not. Students that wait to apply will not be penalized.
Kind of along the lines of grades, coursework, will taking the minimum required units per semester negatively impact your application?
No, we only require that our business majors take 13 units per semester, so we're not going to penalize applicants for doing the same thing.
Okay. And then another question similar, are you penalized for opting out of taking classes, like if you had AP credit that fulfilled some of the prerequisites?
No, I mean, we feel that, our cutoff for the AP exams are high enough that your knowledge base should be sufficient to fulfill the requirement. And of course, there'll be other courses at Berkeley that we have to evaluate because it's important for us to see that you can handle the rigor of Berkeley. Not all of our courses, not all of our prereqs can be satisfied with exams. So there definitely will be some that we can see a letter grade for, but no, taking exam credit you won't be penalized for that.
If we decided to use pass no pass or not to use pass no pass spring 2020 and got a bad grade, will that be understandable?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and for maybe by bad grade, I'm not quite sure. I mean, if it's a failing grade, then you have to repeat the course to fulfill the requirement. But as I mentioned before, for spring 2020, we're just looking at C- or higher or a pass. That's it.
Okay. When does the application open?
Monday, November 2nd.
At 12 p.m., right?
At 12 p.m. Yes, thank you, Monique.
Sorry. Thank you. And then, let's see. Um, does your resume have to be business related?
Not at all. We get that question all the time. And I guess it makes sense that you're applying to the business major. So I guess it makes sense that one would think that all of their activities have to be business related, but not everyone who majors in business wants to go into traditional business fields like accounting or banking or consulting. So there are students who are really much, very much interested in the arts, and perhaps they want to start a nonprofit. So all of their activities may be around the arts, whether it be dance or music, or, we have students who want to become music executives, and they're in bands, they're really into music, they manage groups, and they want to do business because it's going to give them the skill set that they need to work in the music industry. So with respect to activities, pursue what you're passionate about. That's really what's going to add value. That's really what's going to make the resume piece shine. It doesn't have to all be business related by any stretch. But then again, in the essays, if you have a lot of activities that are not attached to business, you want to make sure that you articulate to us how business fits in. Why is a business degree essential in allowing you to reach your goals? And that's how all the different pieces of the application will come together for us.
A couple questions about AP and credit from other universities, especially fulfilling prerequisites. How do we confirm that those credits have been received and are valid? And then how do we include, or how do we show that in the application?
If you look at your transcript, there should be a transfer credit report that will show units that were awarded for courses taken elsewhere. That's what we're going to use to assess whether or not you receive units for those courses, but you should be able to go into Cal Central and see that as well. And for those of you who are applying in November, you want to make sure that you check that. And if you don't see the units there for courses that you want to use or units for the exams, you need to work with Cal Student Services or undergraduate admissions to ensure that all of that information is posted by early February.
If you retake a course, will that negatively impact you?
No, I mean, not really. We understand that stuff happens. Sometimes students just don't do well in the course because they had a lot of stuff going on. If you received a C- or higher, you should not repeat the course. But if you received, a D or F in a course, then you definitely need to repeat it. And if there's a reason for not performing well initially, just let us know. We admit students who repeat courses quite often because stuff happens. People get sick. Family situations happening, you're just not able to perform as you had hoped. So again, just make sure that you utilize the optional essay to articulate your circumstance.
About pass to pass again, is there a possibility of HAAS allowing a pass to fulfill a prerequisite this semester, just like in spring 2020?
We've talked to the assistant dean about this, and for now, our policy is that all prerequisites taking fall 2020 and beyond need to be taken for a letter grade. And the rationale for the change in spring 2020 had a lot to do with the method of instruction changing midway through the semester. You started with the option to take, courses in person, and then midway through it shifted to all virtual coursework. So that was sort of the rationale for shifting and allowing students to take courses pass, no pass. We do understand that students are still in the midst of a pandemic, but the method of instruction was clearly articulated early on. So for now, all the courses we're going to push forward with need to be for a letter grade for the prereqs.
Thank you. A question about if you're double majoring, can we articulate this about our other major and its relation to pursuing business in the essay?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if you have two different tracks that you're truly passionate about and you want to study the intersection between the two, absolutely articulate that in the essays, because it gives us a view as to why you're interested in business and what you want to do with the degree.
Thank you. So we are getting close to 7. We have about 9 minutes left. So we'll just take a couple more questions, and then there are 2 questions that are asking about advice that you would give to students. So I want to get to those. A question about resume verification. If we're asked to verify one of our resume entries, but our point of contact becomes out of reach, is there another way to verify our activity?
Not really. I mean, anything that you put on that resume needs to be verifiable by another person, whether it be an employer, faculty advisor, the head of the organization that you've been affiliated with. So just be mindful of that. If you put it on the resume, that if it needs to be verified, if you can't verify it, then that's not going to be a good look for you.
Okay. Another question about double majoring. Will pursuing a double major hurt my chances, or would that be reported anywhere on our application or transcript?
No, pursuing a simultaneous degree is not going to hurt you at all. We don't penalize students for having academic interest outside of the business major. But with respect to the question, does it appear on the application? It does not. So we wouldn't know. But for those that are interested in pursuing the simultaneous degree, it's not going to hurt you at all in our decision making.
Okay. So I think I want to move to the questions about advice that you would give. Some students had questions about the class profile, GPAs and average GPAs and GPA range. So we'll just refer you to look at the website. That is information is listed there, so you can see that as well as the number of students admitted, because there's interest in that statistic as well. What advice do you have for undocumented students who might have not had the opportunity to work or have an internship? And how can we make up for this in our application?
A very good question. And of course, having internships, even for other students, is not mandatory in our application. So I think Alessandra mentioned it earlier. With respect to the resume, there are a number of ways that you can engage, whether it be family responsibilities, clubs, organizations, community service. So whatever it is you have the opportunity to participate in, then go ahead and do that. But not having an internship is not going to be, your application won't be viewed negatively because you don't have an internship. Work experience is not mandatory. There are a lot of different ways in which you can demonstrate leadership in the resume piece. So just utilize other avenues that are consistent with your circumstance.
Alessandra covered some of these in her presentation about the different components, but from your perspective, what are some things that have really stood out to you around the essay? So what are some common traits of a great essay?
First and foremost, be authentic. Tell your story. Don't create a situation where you want to tell us what you think we want to hear. Because the most memorable essays are those that where the student has been authentic and they really told their individual story. Also, I think Alessandra mentioned as well that the essay is not really a chronology of your activities. That's what the resume is for. And of course, you'll touch a little bit on your accomplishments in the essay, but it shouldn't just be one after the other as a chronology of your involvement. That's a missed opportunity. The essay needs to provide additional detail. We have your grades, which is going to tell us something. We have the resume, which is going to provide us with a little bit of information as well. And the essay is really going to bring it all together for us because it's going to be the opportunity for you to tell your story. So just answer the questions that we ask. First and foremost, you have to understand why you're applying to the business major, because that's what we're looking for when we're assessing the essay, the mandatory essay. We're really looking for students to explain to us, why is a business major essential for your goals? There are tons of majors at Berkeley. You can get to the same place a lot of different ways. Why are you interested in the business major? So just think about that and be prepared to communicate that as effectively as possible.
Awesome, thank you. Kind of a follow-up about activities and folks who have had to step up in their responsibilities at home. How would we verify those responsibilities on the resume, just as a follow-up?
Good question. It'll probably be the first time that we're having to verify things like that in the resume. But I'm assuming that we would just ask you to get a family member to document what you've done.
Thank you. And then the last question around advice. What resources are available to students, especially EOP students who are interested in applying to HAAS, to get support in the application process? And yeah, just any general tips you would give to students applying to HAAS.
So all of us, this is the admissions team for HAAS. So now you have a point of reference. You have people that you can actually reach out to ask questions. So feel free to ask us directly any questions that you have. The EOP office is also a good resource for students. We're going to have a application workshop with the HAAS Business School Association in November. And that'll be a great opportunity for you to connect with actual business majors who have already gone through the process and can provide you with some insight about their personal experience. We're going to do something similar with HABA, the HAAS Undergraduate Black Business Association, and the Latino Business School Association as well, student association. So those are just a few student orgs that we work with that can provide you with some assistance with the HAAS application. But I would reach out to professors as well. They are more than happy to probably review your essays. But again, for us, we are your point of contact in HAAS, so don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Awesome. Thank you, Sojourner, for fielding all those questions. That was a lot. That was like 60 some of them.
Yeah,
And thank you. Thank you, Alessandra, and thank you everyone for attending tonight. We're really excited to be here with you and answer your questions. I'm going to just, Alessandra already did it. She linked in the chat. If you want to check out our website and learn more about the upcoming events, you can do that. You can also email us at uginfo@berkeley or at haas.berkeley.edu if you have any other questions. And we also are available for one-on-one advising appointments, and I'll put the link in the chat for that if you're interested and want to speak further with one of us to just talk through the application process. But good luck, and we really look forward to seeing your application to HAAS this year or next. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.